Začenjamo še z zadnjim predavanjem letošnje mednarodne poletne šole politične ekologije. Predavanje se bo nanašalo na neko prakso, socialistično prakso na Kubi. Ne bom na ustaljen način predstavil predavateljico Gladys. Midva se poznava, mislim, da 4 ali 5 let, ko sem jo prvič poslušal na Kubi. Takrat je govorila o izkušnjah, ki jih je Kuba imela v zadnjem obdobju. In zdelo se mi je, da je to nekaj, kar bi bilo treba slišati tudi na mednarodni poletni šoli, in zaradi tega smo jo povabili na letošnjo mednarodno šolo. Ko je Kuba šla čez prvo tranzicijo, se je naša predavateljica šele rodila, to je bilo leta 60. Potem, ko je Sovjetska zveza razpadala in je šla v tranzicijo, je študirala v Rusiji, potem se je ukvarjala tudi z kitajsko tranzicijo in v zadnjem času je na osnovi tega znanja in spoznanj veliko prispevala tudi k kubanski tranziciji, tudi v času, ko so pred nekaj leti spreminjali ustavo. Na nek način se mi zdi, da je ta izkušnja, ki jo lahko kubanska tranzicija, poznamo iz časopisov, kaj se je dogajalo v 50-ih letih, manj poznamo, kaj se dogaja zdaj. In zato smo jo povabili, da nam bo o teh stvarih spregovorila. Če rečem, da smo začeli z prvim predavanjem, ki je govorila o ekokomunistu, ki ima slab občutek, bomo zdaj prisluhnili predstavnici iz socialistične države, ki pa ima dober občutek sami sebi. Izvoli, Gladys, izvoli.
So for the ones who didn't understand, we have Dr. Gladys Cecilia Hernandez Pedraza here from Cuba, Deputy Director, Senior Research Fellow at the Department of Global Financial Tendencies, Center for World Economy Studies in Cuba. She'll give a presentation. Just share the screen. The floor is yours.
I really want to thank all the people that made it possible for me to be here. And this has been a very wonderful week with a lot of challenging ideas concerning the transition to a decarbonized world. You will see, I will try to tell you the truth. Somehow Cuba started going to a decarbonized world by the fact that the Soviet Union and the socialist countries community disappeared. So we had to do this on a very hard way. Almost alone, the country was left almost alone, coming out of the socialist community, and we had to try a way to survive. And of course, we had to try this way because we want to maintain our socialist system. I'm sorry, we still believe, I mean, the majority of the population still believe that this is okay for us. But this is how we have done. I just want to begin with some catastrophic ideas, because being in the earth, you are not supposed to forget what is already done. In the very first place, there is an idea concerning science. I don't know how much you know about the debate, but still there are people that doesn't believe what scientists are showing us concerning climate change. And there is a very strong truth the temperature of the land, of the planet, it's already has increased always 1 Celsius degree. And for islands, the minimum optimum is 1.5. Being an island, you can disappear. Life in your country can be disappearing with 1.5 Celsius degree. And then the prognoses are really very sad. They are saying to us that if we don't manage, being humanity, being the people that had created so much technology and had developed so many ways to live and to better our life, if we don't manage to control the situation, then the increase can reach 4 Celsius degree by the end of 2100. And of course, this predicts terrible consequences because the sea level will be higher than 1 meter. For coastal life, especially for island, this is really very, very, very dangerous. Then in the continental countries, you will have extreme heat wave, 9 degrees hotter. We have seen already what kind of hottest can they be today. And Southern Europe especially, those are ideas from the IPCC panel, it can resemble a desert, because one of the main facts of this increase of temperature is that the zone in which Central Europe is situated will be more dry. I mean, it's some of the ideas, I will not tell you all of them, but those are things you are supposed to believe. And there is a debate concerning what we have been discussing all the week in terms of how many people says that this is the climate must change naturally, and what the scientists are saying is not true. Actually, the IPCC also has come to an idea, this climate change due to man is already unequivocal. And when you say this, is because they are already convinced. They are already convinced that what they have been studying, researching, and when 3,000 people united in one international research institution, the IPCC, came to that idea, something supposed to be going on. And at the same time, there are other institutions also working with climate change, like the Climate Change Convention, or the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Intergovernmental Platform, EAT-BEST, and so on, so on. I mean, climate change has become one of the most important things for the global problems, in the global problems, and because of their urgency. I had another kind of feature. Sorry, I'm an economist, because population is still growing, and we will have a scarcity in terms of food, water, energy by the year 2030 due to this increase of global population and the increase of consumption. So when we have studied in this way, the growth, or we have seen what are the possible pathways towards an economy, a developed economy, but with less consumption, reasonable consumption. This is something that is, of course, a challenge, but it's something that we are to give a thought to, because some way what we have and what we will have in a time is almost unreachable. We will not have resources. Actually, there is a scientist research that says that today we are consuming 1.5 planets in terms of the resources we consume, and that we will not have 2 planets to maintain this kind of consumption. I am talking about the US National Intelligence Council, and this was in 2013. And we have managed to continue our ways of consumptions. And now, last year, even with the pandemic, the emissions were the highest in the whole period, post-war period. This is something nobody talks about. I'm sorry, I have to do it. There is a lot of inequity in the world. This is the IMF chart, when they show what the countries of the world do. you can see that developing countries being almost 80.9% of the global population only have 62%, 32% of exports, and only 49% of GDP. But if you go inside, you see that there are areas, there are regions like Asia, for example, that have almost 31%. And if you go inside and see that China has the most part, it's really it's unequal how growth and export development is redistributed in the world. And if you want to see the bad countries, those who have no opportunity in many cases, you go down and see highly indebted countries. Here we have 39, now they are 42. And the low income ones also, they had a very, very, very few participation in what is called globalization today, export and growth. Not the growth we are planning, but the actual growth we have. And I should say that this is really hard. We have been discussing these wonderful presentations, wonderful insights to stabilize the climate and limit physical climate risk. Climate science tells us that it is necessary to reduce the addition of greenhouse. But to reach the zero emission is like a complementary play, because many of the emissions in terms of agriculture or in terms of reforestation can be complementing the emissions we have in terms of car fuel or industry fuel or the other sectors of the economies. So we have to pay attention to this. But this is not a way of just eliminating all the emissions. It's the fact that we're supposed to think in how we will find the equilibrium of what we have or what we have to create in terms of reforestation, because the plants give oxygen to the atmosphere. And this is something we are supposed to reflect on. Then there are several industries. You will have here the percentage of how they contribute to the CO2 emissions. I have here power, industry, mobility, buildings. I mean, it's very interesting research topic from one of the United Nations documents, agriculture, forestry, even waste. Nobody talk of this. How much waste is considered in terms of managing? And sometimes we see the task, we say zero emissions, and this is not so, it's not very easy to obtain, but there are a lot of different spheres in which we can try to develop policies and measures that can contribute, if not to the zero, at least to the decreasing in the emissions. Then effective decarbonization actions includes, of course, changing this energy mix away from fossil fuels and towards zero emissions. But then you also have another kind of transitions. You're supposed to get efficient in the industry. This is one of the things that China is doing. We have been discussing the case of China during the week, but this is very strong measure in China to close the factories that actually are polluting because they use in a very bad way the carbon, and also to develop technologies to increase efficient by the in the use of carbon per unit of production. Then you also have the utilizing the circular economy, consuming emission intensive good. I mean, trying to moderate this kind of consumption, deploy carbon capture, utilization of storage technology, enhancing sinks in both long-lived and short-lived greenhouse houses. And when we have these pictures, we came to the climate change in the Caribbean countries. This is a very, very sensible topic for us in the Caribbean Sea, but if you are supposed to talk about all the islands in the world, let's say that the seas, the country is small, countries, and most small developing countries, island countries, are supposed to be in a very bad conditions if the increase of temperature goes up 1.5 Celsius degree. The Caribbean small islands are vulnerable to climate change impacts, including sea level rise, invasive species, ocean acidification, changes in rainfall pattern, increased temperatures, and changing hazard regimes, including hurricanes, floods, and droughts. And of course, given high dependency in the Caribbean seas on natural resources for livelihoods, a focus on ecosystems and their interaction with people is essential for climate change adaptation. So for us, the ecosystem-based adaptation is very important. It's true that there are supposed to be a combination of mitigation and adaptation, but for island, adaptation is really a priority. For example, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment outlines a decline in worldwide ecosystem health, thereby threatening the provision of ecosystem services. 60% of the reef that are the more important ecosystem for the Caribbean seas are in danger by overfishing, whilst marine-based threats to coral reef, from shipping, ineffective management of protected areas, diseases and warming sea temperature that are widespread across the Caribbean. And you say this like this, it's a sentence, but how many lives depend on that? And from these kind of problems we are facing already, there are some we can moderate. There are some we can control. It's true that taking into account the cumulative emissions in the atmosphere, some of the problems related to climate change will have to remain because they are already, there is a natural inertia in what is happening. But nevertheless, there are other that countries are supposed to moderate and take into account too. For Cuba, there have been several experiences. Those experiences, as I had already told you, some came from the fact that we were almost left alone by the disappearance of the Soviet Union and the socialist community. Some of them came because of our scientists. We have almost 15 scientists working at the IPCC panel, and they have reached several ideas. They have come to several ideas that are very important concerning climate change. So one of the most important things we have already as a conclusion is the increase in science and innovation perception to deal with climate change. Because you do have the people who have the ideas, so you don't have to believe them, no, you have to work with them, because it's true that otherwise we will have a very, very bad situation in the country. And so there is also an idea of cooperation among all the countries, not only in the Caribbean Sea, but with the international community, with international foreign institutions that usually are giving priority to climate change and can provide with finance for developing certain kind of projects. Then there is a combination of methodologies from mitigation and adaptation processes and the alliances among private and state sectors. There are some experiences. I will tell you about the ecosystem approach in Cuba. The state plan we have already approved to deal with climate change. We call it tarea vida, I mean, life task, because of the importance it has, because it is a plan for survival, and because it is a plan to take into account all things we have been talking about and that are supposed to be paid attention. Sorry. The development of renewable energies, of sustainable agriculture, and of course, how we treat environmental education. From the ecosystem approach, this is what I want to show you. Those are the mangrove we are planting on our coast to recover what we have lost. I mean, using coast for tourism, we lose a lot of those ecosystem systems. Now we are planning to recover them. Mangrove occupy 5.1% of Cuba land area and are found in 70% of our coast. This is how they look, many of them now. This is the real mangrove. Remember yesterday, the presentation of the Professor Arturo? Look at the roots. The roots prevent the sea to enter and of course develop a special ecosystem for life. This is the forest near the mangrove. And those are our corals that are supposed the more montane corals in the Caribbean Sea. Because we have special policies concerning coral reef treatment. We also have touristic purposes for the corals, but with special requirements to visit them. And then this is the state plan. The yellow 1 points are the towns that are supposed to be affected by climate change. And 125 towns. The state plan to confront the climate change was approved in 1917, includes the territorial dimension. I mean, the local towns, the local community are supposed to be involved. Considers 3 periods till the year 2100, 5 strategic actions and 11 tasks. Increase in temperature that are getting the impacts, the main impacts for Cuba are extreme events, rainfall, sea level rise to almost 1 meter by the year 2100. And we are supposed to reduce as actions population density in low-lying coastal areas, new construction concepts for low-lying coastal areas not in the dune. I mean, we are supposed to move whatever we have inside and build the natural frontier with mangrove and the other ecosystems. The agriculture, sustainability activities for food security, and reduce cultivation areas close to low-lying coastal areas because they will disappear. Those are the tasks. Adaptation, implement the necessary legal regulation. We have just passed now a new law on environment and climate change. It's just 2 weeks ago. Ensure the availability and efficient use of water. Conserve, maintain, and fully recover the sandy beaches of the archipelago. Remember, Cuba is not an island, it is an archipelago of over 2,000 small islands all over the country. Direct reforestation, stop the deterioration, rehabilitate and conserve coral reef. The scientists' result of the macro project, what you saw, the map, is a macro project designed by the Ministry of Environment, Science, Environment, and Innovation. Implement and control climate change adaptation, strengthen the monitoring, the surveillance, the early warning systems. For us, early warning systems were the first policies we introduced in the country, because it's amazing how even in other islands of the Caribbean Sea, the people don't know that hurricanes are coming, that they are supposed to be threatening the country, and they don't know why. So the system is very, very profound. You receive notice of a hurricane or a temperature change or whatever from the very beginning, almost 4 levels of information. The first 1 and 2 is for you to be prepared. The third is to warn you that something very bad is coming. And the 4th is that if you do need, you have to evacuate. The red zones are the ones who are supposed to disappear in the water. So it's quite a challenge. It's danger and vulnerability scenarios. When you have such a picture, you're supposed to do something. You cannot stay and think of too much philosophy or something. I mean, you have to do something because it's what you have. And the first element of this situation is that you have to trust the people that have been more than 40 years working with the task. If they say to you that you are supposed to do something because your people will disappear or their towns will disappear, and it's very funny because we do a lot of information, we prepare videos, we try to convince the people, and this is environmental education. And for example, when you go to a coastal town, they live on fisheries. They have worked all their life with fisheries. And you tell them that they have to move inside, almost 13, 15 kilometers inside the country. Sometimes they don't understand because it's their way of life, what you are threatening. But on the other hand, they're very funny. For example, you go, you present them with the problems the community will face, and then somebody says, okay, 10 years ago, the sea was there, almost 10, 15 meters from the place we are, and he's on the water already. I mean, you tell them, okay, you know that the water will be increasing, that this part of the coastal zone will disappear. And he says, okay, yeah, I can understand because 10 years ago, the water was there and now the water is here. So even nature is showing people that they're supposed to take care. And this is what we're trying to do. And in energy efficiencies, of course, is we are trying to introduce renewables to cover 24% of our energy mix. Then we have been doing research and we have been receiving investments from China for solar and wind generators. This is something that it has to be done slowly by slowly. We also changed to gas in almost all the country because of a new system we have for foreign investments from Canada. Gas, of course, is not a renewable, but it's not oil. And then in terms of the electric sector, we want to increase to 24 or more. Then in terms of sustainable agriculture, this is also very important for us. There was a moment in the country we didn't have any kind of imports from food in the 90s. So we turned to sustainable agriculture. It was prioritizing organic farming methods, the production of usable, edible crops, and the use of peasant labor. We create such kind of guerrilla for designing gardening initiative and to widespread voluntary participation. And we managed to develop what we call it urban agriculture today with science, for example, because there were no pesticides, there were no nitrogenous, nothing. And we came to biological control of plants. We created several farms, almost 200 farms, for producing insects that control the epidemics in the plantations. And this is the way we are doing. I mean, you say, okay, sustainable agriculture, the efficiency is not the same. Because when you have all the products, usually agriculture used today in the well, the efficiency is really very high. But at least the products are organic. And what we managed to do at that time now has been increasing. For example, we introduced 400 oxes in the country to try to plot the land with them. And now we have more than 5,000 because they have been reproducing. I mean, this is a process from the 90s to now. This is how you can see, those are the organoponics in the cities. They have their own employment. They have their own system for producing compost. I mean, this is what we are doing. And of course it is in Spanish, but nevertheless, you see how perceptions change. What is more important for a country that is an island today? It's very, all the 16 sustainable development aims for us are around climate change. This is how we see life. And this is all. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Slušalke si morate gor dati. To mi ne bo skozi prevajal za mano. Naj povem, da je Gladys ima alergijo, zato je tudi nosila masko skozi. Ja, in ima težavo z govorjenjem. It's okay.
Yeah, well, thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask you if you can go deep in the idea of the territorial dimension that you have mentioned about the task, the Tarea Vida. How are you dealing and what are your approach to territory and what are maybe the complexities that you deal when you add this dimension in the task?
Okay, Cuba is supposed to be a socialist country. So the state was supposed to be the most important state level. But then with years, we have introduced decentralization to the provinces and to the territories, municipalities, we call it. And this is the year by year. I mean, they preserve, for example, in terms of finance organization, they preserve a part of the earnings they made, and they can dedicate those earnings whatever they want to do in the municipality. It has worked in a way in which they design their own priorities to develop, especially in social and environmental dimensions. And for example, these pictures I show you of the Mangrove Restoration are made by the community living in the coast. So the scientists go there. There is a group created in which they have authorities, people of the community, and the scientists, and of course the party guy, and whatever it is that is related to our kind of system. And so they work on the communities, with the communities, and the communers are the ones who deal with implementing, for example, planting mangrove. So this is something that is, these photos I'll show you are from a very specific region in the south part of Havana. It's called Mayabeque Artemisa, and they do have wonderful results because now the relation among sea and, land is more, is treated through the creation of the mangrove. The scientists said that mangrove are supposed to be a natural frontier. This is what we call it soft adaptation. You don't need so much money to develop soft adaptation. It's the same when you plant forests, when you plant parks, when you develop plantations, not for agricultural purposes, but to really help the nature and this is how it works. You are supposed to organize the community, and then the community will be working at the local level, because it's ecosystem. Ecosystems are local. This is a mistake to think. You can have an ecosystem in the Amazonas, for example, but how many tribes or people live in the Amazonas? If you want to deal with the ecosystem, you will have to look at the territorial municipality process.
Daria Lazareva, NGO Ecodia. I have not question, but rather a comment that I feel your pain. I'm from Ukraine, and we also face a lot of challenges in climate change mitigation and adaptation. And what touches me the most is that issue with sea level rise and trying to communicate this issue to local communities, because our organization also have a research about how sea level rise will impact local communities. And it says that almost 1 million hectares of land will be under the water till the end of this century. Depends on like trajectory, will we decrease greenhouse emissions or not? And we are like paying a big amount of attention, trying to communicate it to the state government, to local governments, to communities, that they have to prepare, that they have to be more resilient to this issue. So yeah, I know what are you doing. I know how much efforts it costs to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's very costly. You can do whatever you want to do at the same time, because we don't have the money. And in the case of the coastal towns, coastal villages, they're supposed to be moved. So that you are supposed to do slowly by slowly. We have started with several towns, building new towns inside the country. And when the town is already ready, many people don't want to come there because they feel that they will be apart from what they have done in all their life. This is the other part of the question. How you convince them that maybe for a while they will be living in the town and that they can go and fish, because still the sea will be there. The fact that they have to go to school, the children have to go to school, you will have your hospital, you will, in another part, it's something different, but this is your town. And in a while, you will have to change because the sea will be in such conditions that they will cover. There was a film and the internet, there is some of these fantastic videos, science fiction videos of what many famous cities in the world will be if they don't take the actions they are supposed to do, and concerning climate change. And for example, it was amazing. You can look at internet how New York will look, how London will look, because it's sea level. And what is happening now is an inertial process. And the fact that everything will be warming, that ice will be melting more, and those ice increase the sea level. I mean, it's a huge picture that somebody don't believe, but actually we're supposed to do, because now we have an increase already of sea level. As this fisherman says, the sea was there 10 years ago and now the sea is here. And in 10 years more, it will be higher. So thank you.
Hello, hi, thank you very much for your presentation. We talked about the state, the green state, the capitalist state during the summer school so far, and you mentioned now the socialist state and the process of decentralization. And I'm wondering whether, from your perspective, you could elaborate a bit more on maybe the weaknesses or the limitation and the strengths from that form of state to address climate change. Thank you.
Okay, this is a very hard question. I don't want to be accused, but unfortunately, pandemic has shown that the strength of the state is very important at some extent. You can have state interventions or not. It doesn't matter you are a capitalist or a socialist country, but the problem that at some point in the life of a country, the state is supposed to play a special role. This is something that pandemic has shown. For example, the fact that 86% of the population in developed countries has already been vaccinated, 1, 2, 3 shots, and there is only 6% of those 8% of population in the world is only 6% vaccinated in the developing world, is a fact that shows the state doesn't work. So I do prefer a state that mediates, that creates conditions for people to develop. That's what we have been doing in the last 10, 30 years, introducing decentralization, creating conditions. And I just want to remember you that Cuba is not a normal country. We don't live normally. We live under the most unjust and cruel blockade from the United States economy. In extent that you can imagine, we can use dollars. We have been, they have been creating a lot of measures even to stop trade and fuel imports during the pandemic. I mean, it's something that they do because Cuba has to renounce to what we're building. And this is very sad, but we are not supposed to be perfect. We do have a lot of problems, but in Cuba, health, education, social security is free. We defend this, even when there is no economy, we defend this because those are gains of the revolution. But it doesn't, for example, do you know that we have our vaccine? We have 5 vaccines for COVID. Now I have 5 shots. I have 3 that are the more important, and then I have been receiving 2 reinforcements. I mean, it's something we have to defend because we have managed to create this health system. We have managed to create a biotechnological sector that is totally abnormal for a developing country, but we had created. And now, with this problem of climate change, this is the same. You are supposed to design a policy that helps you in creating conditions for your communities to know what is happening, to give them a piece of information, and then to give them possible actions they can do. And they will decide they want to do it or not. But if you explain properly, you will find consensus and you will find that they will agree with you. And I don't want to call it democracy because they say we don't have democracy. Just let's say, call it consensus. Because it's like this. If you don't tell them, they will know. They will don't know. I have an anecdote, for example. I was traveling to Granada. There was a hurricane coming. I called the lady that had invited me and says, okay, I suppose you have to cancel the conference. because there is a hurricane coming. And she said, what hurricane? And Granada is an island like us. So that's why I say that when we started with early warning, and early warning is something that the Caribbean seas cannot live without it. And Cuba has been helping the other islands to develop warming and this kind of policy, because it was normal. The hurricane came, destroy everything, and the people. It's not a problem that you will stop the hurricane, do whatever they had to do. Unfortunately, with the climate change and the high temperatures, the impacts of those hurricanes are higher and higher. They just erase everything for the sea, for the land. But at least you will save people. And this is something that is very important for us. But this is like the state prevents many things. The states provide many things. We also had many things against the state, because it's like that. When the policies doesn't work, you are against what the government is doing, and you will protest, you will argue. For example, now with inflation, we also have inflation. Many people is talking that inflation is not normal for Cuba. It's true, it's not normal for Cuba. We have never had such an inflation, but the crisis is global. It's pandemic plus global crisis plus impacts for many, many geostrategic problems. So you are having inflation. What do you want? It's something that hasn't to do with the state properly. And how you solve this problem for the Cuban nation? If the United States cannot solve the problem for the nation, or in Europe, the inflation is 8% now. I mean, it's something you are supposed to follow. You are supposed to see how you can provide more social help for those vulnerable groups. I mean, but this is a global problem. But this is how our state works. And the pandemic was an example, a very, very important example that the state is important. I don't want to say, but in many, many countries, they couldn't really do what they had to do, especially in developing world. It's sad, but it's like this. Sorry.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question regarding international relations and the aid that Global North was supposed to give the Global South, and probably this just didn't realize yet. And can you talk a little about of the Cuban experience from the fall of the Soviet Union until now? What's the role of other countries that try to help you? You mentioned a little bit of China and the imperial monster you have as your neighbor, but can you talk a little bit more about that, and how, for example, you would address Global North countries and representatives from Slovenia, for example?
This is a very hard question. I love my Slovenian representative. You know, we have relations, diplomatic relations with almost all the countries in the world. Many of them help Cuba with solidarity. There is an understanding all over many countries of what Cuba is doing. And because of this blockade and because of the work the state do in Cuba, to somehow there are people that really like what we are doing, and they help Cuba with donations. With the pandemic, we received donations from more than 62 countries. We are not alone anymore. There was a moment in which we were alone because we used to be part of the socialist community, and the socialist community disappeared. So 71% of our trade was concentrated on socialist countries. And from these, almost 45 was with the Soviet Union. So when they disrupt the relations with Cuba, we were almost alone. So we started new reforms, new transformations. We introduced in the country a lot of measures. For example, now we have private businesses, we have private investment. We developed the relations with many countries in the world, especially in Latin America, in Asia. And of course, we have there are three main partners in terms of trade. We have Spain. Remember that Spain used to be the colony of Cuba during many years. Now they are our economic partners. We have China, we have Venezuela, we have Nicaragua, and Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru. Those are main social partners. Vietnam, and economic partners. And Russia, of course, is also an economic partner, because Russia used to have a lot of investments in Cuba. So many of the machinery we use still belongs to Russia. And there are agreements with them. And with China is the same. China is the second trade partners to many countries in Latin America, and is the second trade partner for Cuba now. And this is how it works. We have been rebuilding our foreign relations, but of course we do still have a lot of problems with our neighbor 90 miles away. There was a very nice period with Obama, in which the relations started to enter in a new pathway, in which we see to deal with problems we have from the 60s. But then it stopped because the government Trump didn't want to do anything. And now Biden also have been neglecting the fact that they have to begin a dialogue with Cuba. But it's not only with Cuba. You know that what we're seeing in terms of geostrategic movements today is something that is very sad, even for globalization. Because when we started globalization, it was like free trade, free financial developments. And now this is this tendency of protectionism, of national economies taking place. And this is very sad for all the countries in the world, and especially for Cuba because of the blockade. The blockade is not only a law. The blockade is there are more than 100 laws that are supposed to be dismantled for the Congress of the United States. So they are supposed to go law by law and make a consensus if they put away this law or not. So this is not a process of 1 day or two. It's a long process, because they include new measures, new policies, new policies during the pandemic, 2020, 2001. They approved 246 new measures against Cuba. Before, there were almost 1,500. And now we have two. It's more like, it's very similar to the sanctions to China or to Russia. And it is kind of policy that doesn't help anyone. And I remember there was a very nice saying yesterday in one of the lectures that says that when you want to do something, you cannot make the others do what they don't want to do. So it was a wonderful idea, because it's like that. They don't want to live with Cuba in a very equilibrium way. They just want us to do what they have done already. And we have survived. It means it works, more or less. Even in the worst moments, like the pandemic. Nobody wanted to sell to Cuba anything. I mean, the raw materials for the vaccines, we had the vaccines already prepared. We had them tested in the country, but then we cannot produce in a bigger way because we need more of this kind of raw material, special one, reactive and so on. And then they came by donation. So it means that some people in the world still believe in what we're doing. And it's okay. Maybe there should be a day in which we will not have need of more donations, because we will have the possibility to develop what we have to develop. And in many years, we have done this. After the 90s, we recovered. The economic growth started to be 2 to 4% yearly. We have developed the touristic sector from 56 hotels to more than 300 hotels. We developed the biotechnological sector. We started to produce our own oil and gas. So the oil and gas we consume mainly is Cuban, but it's not enough. We have to import more. But now we will be covering these imports with renewables. This is how we see the situation. But for that also we need finance. And in terms of climate change, there are very interesting funds that are financing climate change transition. And for example, we receive finance to build 2 solar camps in Cuba and 2 aeolic from the United Nations Green Fund. And this is how we are doing. But it's hard. It's really very hard.
Hi. You talked before that now the state allows private ownership of businesses and private investments. Do you consider this as a positive change or maybe not?
I am from the older school. I don't like it, but I feel that it has been okay. Okay, I have to be honest. I do like my state because my state controls, give us a lot of opportunities. It's preoccupied with life of people. But I understand that private business also are okay. And then we have decided that in the first place, private business should go to services. So we have paladars, restaurants, for having the hair done, barber, and for services. But then we started with a new wave. A new wave was a cooperative for building, cooperative for craft makers, to make shoes, to make dresses. If you someday come to Cuba, you will see them because they have ferries and they sell all the productions on ferries. Now they are making furniture also. And this is not only in Havana, this is in the whole country. And when there is a ferry, they come to the Havana and show what they're producing in the provinces. And it's okay. It's part of the economy. It represents how the people can be ingenious and make different kind of proposals to the life of the country that the state cannot provide, because sometimes the state don't have the resources. They concentrated on health, education, more crucial investments like this, like the renewable ones or energy investments. And so the state has space to deal with things that usually he would have to do if the private business had not developed. So, and this is okay. Still, they are 5% of the GDP, but they're growing. They're growing, especially with the pandemic and the crisis. Now they have received possibility to import and to export. So they produce for the national market and they can also export if they want. Of course, the quality of the exports is to be reviewed. It has to be high quality to export, and this is how it works.
Hello.
My name is Dalia. I'm from University of Ljubljana, and I'm going to try to be brave because it's almost lunchtime. First, I would really like to thank you for mentioning socialism at this summer school. I mean, it's Thursday, so I would like to have seen this on Monday, but and yeah, I would like to ask you if you think maybe that would socialism have to be perhaps rebranded for the 21st century, for the Anthropocene? Because it seems to me that socialism is the only existing way of efficiently countering capitalism. Anything else has to be invented, or it's very small scale, and we will have a very hard time scaling it to the state level. But somehow socialism is still kind of a dirty word. So yeah, do we need to rebrand it so we can use it to counter capitalism and fix the climate change?
Oh, Jesus. This is, can you imagine why Cuba has been under such a huge attack by the United States? They do because they don't want socialists to prevail. And this is the struggle, the class struggle. I'm sorry, but this is how it works. A system in which the state has a very priority job to do, and that usually do whatever they have to do to maintain the society happy and creates policies towards the people, even when we have a long list of mistakes, but still the system works. So this is something that is supposed to be erased from the planet. So I am not saying that we should blend it socialist, because if you should blend it socialist, you will try to keep from the, or to take away from socialist system the things that the capitalist doesn't work, doesn't want. I mean, what we do, we care for people. We have free health system, free security field, free education system. And of course, in the capital as well, maybe you have your public systems, but then you have your private ones. It's true, you have the possibility to select to what school or to what hospital you will be coming to, or you will be sending your children. But it doesn't mean that the public system in a socialist country doesn't work okay, because we have a very, very high level of education in Cuba. Very high. And of course, this is not a problem of changing what is inside. And then what we have seen in this school, this is not up to me to say, but all the lines are saying that the system is not working. And that for this system, you have to introduce changes. You're up to do that. Especially in terms of democracy. Sorry, yes. Because if you want your communities to be part, you have to take your communities in. It's not just words. You have to give them the possibility to discuss, to be part of. Do you know that in Cuba, whatever law we are supposed to pass is reviewed by the whole nation? We have several moments in which the people discuss the law. And then the law goes to the National Assembly, and the national representative introduce, change, erase whatever was distasteful for the people. And this is the way in which the people feel part of the process. It's not the states all over there and the people over there. No, this is not the way it is. And we do that. And climate change, you see, our program is called Life Task. If I have a life task, then everybody is supposed to be in. No matter. Everybody is supposed to be in. And this is something that is happening already. So I should suggest, after what I've seen in the lectures, that you should properly interiorize many, many interesting ideas, because you are supposed to be working with projects, with communities, with, and maybe the governments or the municipality governments don't have the information actually of what is happening. So the first step is to really incite the people. I have an anecdote, sorry. I went to a meeting in the Caribbean islands. It was supposed to be climate change for tourists. And there was a guy that made a wonderful presentation. They show us all the hotels on the dune. And then some of us stood up and says, okay, this is wonderful, but the first thing you have to do is to change your hotels. Because in 50, 60 years, you will not have hotels. And he was crazy, he got angry. It was amazing. It was a very interesting reaction. Lately, I have seen some of the colleagues that were at the meeting. And we used to joke because he has changed his 2 hotels. The guy built 2 more hotels inside the coast. Of course, he will not destroy the ones he has, but at least he has taken into account that somebody was telling him something that was important for him, for his business, for his money, for whatever. But it's reality. Sometimes people we are to work with, and this is the same with us, because don't believe that our leaders in the community, let's say the governors, they are very knowledgeable about what is happening with climate change. No, don't believe that. People live with what they have to do daily. And they need somebody to open their eyes to them. Now it's a state task. Now everybody in Cuba is supposed to deal with climate change. You want it or not? If you work in a municipality that can deal with water stress because of drought, and because of drought in the agriculture, you are supposed to come to scientists and find special species that are supposed to be resistant to water scarcity or to drought. Because otherwise you will not have plants. And this is the way it is. This is the way it works with us. It is working. It's not easy. It's something that we are going to do slowly by slowly. I will not see the results because by the year 2100, I will be already dead. But my children and grandchildren will see that. Because if you don't do now, there is no more space in the future, actually. So thank you so much for your question. Thank you.